We ready? Gone live. Well, welcome back, councillors. 10:15, and a very warm welcome to David. Thanks for zooming in, David, and I think we've got Jane online as well. But I'll hand over to Dawn to start the discussion, and then you've got a bit of a presentation. So thanks very much.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, big welcome to David and the team from Wakakotahi who are going to give us an update. You'll recall that a month or so ago, David and Jane came and saw us and gave us an insight as to the work underway for the business case for the Cambridge to Pierere route. And so, yeah, it's great to get an update. So, yeah, hand over to you. Thank you, David.
Kia ora, thank you. Ngā mihi kia koutou. So, as Dawn said, so first of all, thanks for making the time. As Dawn said, this is a very quick update on the Cambridge to Pierere corridor, including the multimodal options that we talked to you about last time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you'll recall, you know, the map and what have you. There's a couple of other things I'll just update you verbally on, and then if there's time, happy to take any questions about other things that are on your mind. But very quickly, we spoke last time about the work we're doing on multimodal options to complement the Cambridge to Pierere highway bypass. Part of that's partly driven by obviously our desire to create as many transport options as possible, but also as a response to the government's emissions reduction plan and the reduction by 41% of emissions by 2035. And so obviously getting people out of cars and onto walking and cycling is a high priority for us. Our role in all of that obviously is to ensure that we create fit for purpose corridors, and that's, to be honest, the only way we're going to get investment in those corridors is by making sure that they do have multimodal options. And so what we've done, worked with the key stakeholders, including yourselves, we've looked at some high level concepts for 4 potential routes that would enable walking and cycling. And you'll recall from the last meeting, one of the critical tests for us was, do those routes link to the existing cycleways, so the Te Awa cycleway, the river cycleway, and what opportunities does that create, not only from a transport commuter point of view, but also from a recreational point of view, and also from the opportunity that we all know to generate business and growth in the community that results from those really high profile cycle and walking ways. So 4 routes. One next to the main Cambridge to Pierere route, so literally almost creating another lane on the bypass route, and then the others either on the north or south side of Lake Karapiro, one of which includes using the current State Highway corridor as an option. They've all got pros and cons. They all lend themselves to different outcomes, and so what we are planning to do as our next steps is, and we've started this already, is start talking to the landowners that are potentially affected by those 4 routes and what that might mean for them. But also we're going to start seeking some community input into, or more community input into what is important for the wider community in terms of a shared pathway between Cambridge and Pierere. We've done some of that already with online and in-person conversations. We're planning an information day in mid-November, and so, you know, following the normal format, what we would do is provide a drop-in session for people to come in, have a look at maps, give us their feedback immediately, but also follow up. You know, when you've left, often you think, oh, I wish I'd said. So we will also make that opportunity available for people to feedback, and that's really just us gauging what's the community's feeling about this, and what are the things the community really want to get out of what will be a substantial investment in alternative modes of transport for that stretch of the river. We'll take that away. We'll have a look and we'll update the plans accordingly. Obviously, we will do that in conjunction with yourselves and mana whenua. And so we will have a bit more of a detailed conversation. And just to note that we've already had one walkover with mana whenua, looking at, you know, what are the things that might trigger either opportunities or risks for them in terms of those options, and then we will develop a preferred option. And do the technical report based on that preferred option. There's very little point in doing a whole lot of technical assessment on 4 options at the moment if only 1 or 2 of them have viability as we go through that community and stakeholder process. So I guess for you, the next key thing is the November information day, and knowing that we will be doing that to try and gather as much information as we can. That's really it in terms of progress with the cycleway walkway component. But I'll just also let you know that in terms of the Road to Zero safety improvements on the current Cambridge to Pudeti network, as you know, sometime before we are going to be in a position to build the expressway. So we've made the decision that we will invest in the current corridor to make it as safe as possible and do the upgrades that are necessary to make that a good road to drive on. So we've done 1.6 kilometres of medium barrier just north of Maungatautari, and Jane and I drove through there yesterday with a kind of critical eye as to what had been done, and it looks pretty good. We've got another 2.4 kilometres to be installed this summer, and preparations for that are already underway. We've done the feasibility report for the 7.5 section of expressway from the expressway to Ferguson Gully Road. And as you all know, we've talked about this before, that's the really challenging bit. And as Jane and I drove through yesterday, we were sort of taking special note of the number of exits and what the implications are for those. And there's some quite elegant solutions that have come forward as we've been talking with landowners and businesses that are run along there. So we've submitted that technical report for approval, and then once that's gone through that process, we will start implementation. We've also started some engagement with landowners around the Karapiro-State Highway 1 area in terms of that intersection. And as you know, we've proposed a roundabout in the feasibility report for that section. So at this stage, we need to do a bit more detailed design, go back to landowners and stakeholders, do a little bit more community engagement just to test the thinking for that site, and then move to the next step, which of course is seeking investment approval to implement those changes. So there's a fair bit of water to go under the bridge yet in that space, but we are making, I think, pretty good progress. Jane, anything that I've missed there?
No, I think you've done a very good job there.
Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen, and just a couple of other things, just points of interest, I suppose, because I'm almost certain they'll come up in questions. State Highway 129 roundabout, we have, as you will be aware, we've been in the Environment Court trying to resolve the issues around land access to build that roundabout. The hearing was held on the 5th to the 8th of September, so it's done now, and really we're in the court's hands now in terms of waiting for a decision on that hearing. Can't give you a steer about how we think that's going to land, unfortunately. And we're currently working through the legal processes for land acquisition for the Cambridge to Puri corridor, and as you know, again, we've got funding to do designation and some land purchase as part of the New Zealand Upgrade Program. So we're progressing that at the moment, and you know that'll take a wee while, but we are making good progress on that as well. And just on a maintenance note, again, because you know potholes and surfaces have been a hot topic lately, we are planning to resurface Sloane Street and Te Awamutu, not far from you guys, in mid-October. We know that the temporary seal that was put down a couple of years ago has not survived particularly well. It's not unsafe, but it's also, you know, it's not looking its best. It's not a great surface to drive on. And so we are planning to do proper resurfacing there in October, just waiting really for this weather to settle down as much as anything. It'll take about a week, and the way we'll manage that is nighttime road closures to try and minimise the amount of disruption, with a detour by Park Road and Golf Road. Just to, you know, as I say, if we do it at night, we minimise the amount of disruption. And Fulton Hogan will have their chip seal crews on the network, the wider network, from October across about 15 kilometres of work in a few places over the next few months. We've also got plans to close State Highway 21 from Rains Road to Penkero Road in mid-October, because there's some minor maintenance works required, but also some pretty significant tree felling required. And again, we'll manage those closures in the same way we have with other closures on the network to minimise the amount of disruption that takes place. I'll probably stop there. Oh no, I won't. I'll also just highlight for you the State Highway 1B revocation process. So you have got in your district a section of State Highway 1B, Victoria Road essentially, that is the process to revoke that now that the expressway has been completed is underway. We've been working with your teams on that, and we've started the initial steps around an MOU around operations and maintenance and how that will be funded and maintained. That should be with your, or has been shared with your team, I think, a couple of days ago, and we're just waiting on first initial comments, and then we'll work through that process as we do with all revocations. I don't imagine that one should have any significant issues for either of us. That's a pretty straightforward process.
Thanks, David. Thanks for your comments. And there were fingers going up while you were talking in terms of questions. So Roger, and then Phil, and then Marcus.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great information on the safety improvements along that Cambridge to Pariri section. Just a point of clarification, though, you mentioned a further, you said in your commentary 2.4 kilometres. But on the page, it's got 4.2.
I can just clarify that it was 4.2.
4.2 total, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. And where, so
Sorry.
where is that 4.2 is a fairly big stretch. So where is that going to occur?
I can answer that one as well.
Okay,
it's basically either side of the current or the short section we've just done near Mangatautri Road.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
and that will include the going up the hill as well.
Going up the hill towards the
Piereri.
Towards the intersection.
The roundabout, what will be the roundabout. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, morning, David and Jane. It's Philip Cole speaking. A question on the Karapira Road, Mangatautri mobile garage. Any updates on that suggestion about moving the large signage and the electronic signage from 1B and Holland Road in the Gordonton area that we talked about? That suggestion?
Yep.
To Karapira Road?
Yes. Yep. So I have spoken to the maintenance and operations team about that. Couple of things. One, they're looking at how much longevity do those signs have in terms of their remaining life, because clearly if they don't have very much remaining life, it would be pointless to move them. It's a relatively costly exercise. The idea has merit, however, so they are looking at it. We won't remove those signs until we have made a final decision on the fate of that crossing at Holland Road, because clearly if the decision that comes out of the process we're in at the moment is to reopen it, obviously the signs will still be necessary. It's going to take a couple of months for us to get to a decision point on that. So we went out to the community, just for your information, we went out to the community, we said, there's a few issues here. One is the rail crossing, one is the safety, long-term safety of that intersection in terms of its geometry. There are no easy solutions, there are no cheap solutions, but there are a range of solutions we could put into future NLTPs. We have some challenges around whether we think those solutions are viable from a cost-benefit point of view. And we have some challenges in terms of whether those solutions will actually resolve KiwiRail's concerns around safety and the potential for derailments. The reaction from the community was understandably quite strong, and what we've undertaken to do is go back and get an independent review of the assessment we'd done with independent costings, and actually to open the book on a blank page and say, tell us if there's something we've missed. That is underway at the moment, and let's assuming that comes back and says actually we don't think this is viable and you should close this, then yes, Philip, the option of relocating the signs would be one that we've done the technical assessment of. If the answer is actually we think there are ways you can open this, then clearly those signs will need to stay. So it's a decision for down the road. We've done enough work now to know, apart from the longevity of those signs, whether it would be viable or not. And yeah, it has merit for sure.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Now, just with regards to the southern end of the Cambridge Expressway above the golf course there, yep, and the northern on-ramp, the potential northern on-ramp and a potential southern on-ramp. With the C to P, is there a design, is part of that design include a northern on-ramp and a southern on-ramp?
No. No. So we went through quite a process when we built that section of on-ramp and off-ramp off the road past the golf course, and for those of you that were there and part of that, you'll know that we came to an agreement in terms of what was viable there. There are significant challenges there in terms of terrain and geometry, not least of which would be having enough room for a viable interchange on-ramp, off-ramp arrangement, because it's 110 kilometres. So the distances for those on-ramps and off-ramps are significant. And as you guys know better than I do, or those of you that are local, there's a very large gully there. And it poses some pretty significant challenges in terms of how you would structure an on-ramp, off-ramp arrangement at that location. It is not in the NLTP. It is not being contemplated as part of the C2P. If we were to go there, we would have to go there with a fair bit of very careful consideration and a funding bid into the NLTP.
That's your objective. That's why you're so against it. It's nothing to do with cost or anything like that, or. Well, I wouldn't say I'm against it. I guess what I would say is, or we're not against it. What we would say is we considered it pretty carefully when we did the original expressway design, and the decision collectively with yourselves as well was that actually that wasn't the best option. I know times change, and I know there's been some investment, particularly in Hautapu, and that's growing in terms of industrial and commercial land. I know that the expressway is changing the way that heavy vehicles behave in terms of accessing, coming off State Highway 3. I don't think we can prejudge the need in the future, who knows, but at the moment, our reluctance particularly is that geometry issue and the terrain issue, and those issues that were there in the original design haven't gone away, unfortunately. They would drive significant cost, but I don't think cost needs to be our initial determinant. I think cost is something we consider a bit later when you've done your technical design. But yeah, there are significant geometry issues there in terms of having a 110 speed limit and the demands for the length and shape of on-ramps and off-ramps.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Marcus.
Hi, David. I'm a Te Awamutu councillor, and I've got to say I drive Sloane Street every single day, multiple times, and a lot of residents do too. And yeah. As a councillor and council, we're getting a lot of flack because it's our road, and there's no way that the public knows that they can actually contact Waka Kotahi to lodge a complaint or direct the feedback back to you guys. Is there anything to do in the future that you can have more public awareness of how people can get in touch with you to let them know, how they're feeling? Because I had another guy ring me last night, and he was talking about the privet on just outside of Kiki. When you turn off Allen Road, it's overhanging the state highway, and we can't really do anything about that. So I tried to find somewhere on the Waka Kotahi website whether he could contact you and tell you guys, but there doesn't seem to be anywhere on your site, or there's nothing public facing that people can get in contact with you and register complaints and things.
Well, I can tell you from personal experience that they manage, and we do have actually quite a bit of contact from the public about not Sloane Street, but also other issues. I personally haven't gone onto the website to have a look lately, but I do know that we have got an 0800 phone number and a call centre that takes a lot of calls. And
it's not very friendly. I think if you're a member of the public and you try and navigate how to reach you guys and how to offer feedback, there's nothing there that sort of says, do you have concerns about trees over a state highway or want to contact us about leaving feedback? You've got the highway 0800 number, but I think it could be a lot friendlier and a lot easier for members of the public to contact you. And this morning as well, I noticed on our local Facebook page that people are talking about the pedestrian crossing across the main street in Kiki, and they're saying councils doesn't look after that, and it's dangerous and stuff again like that. But once again, that's not our thing; it's your thing. So how would I pick that up and go, here, Waka Kotahi, why don't you provide some comment on that and stuff?
Well, in your case, feel free to pass those on to me, and I can do that. Your staff are regularly connected with us, and Dawn can pick up the phone to any number of staff here. So from your guys' point of view, don't hold back. And I understand the confusion for people. Is it a district council road? Is it a state highway? Absolutely. I'll pass the feedback on around the website and ease of access. As I say, I kind of personally haven't tried to use it for that purpose, but I will. I'll pass that on to the team and see what options there are.
Right, thanks. Liz.
Look, thank you, David and Jane. Really great to have you on. Connecting with us today. Really appreciate that. Just going back to the potential on-ramp onto the expressway in Cambridge, I think there's been a lot of commentary through our local papers and a lot of community discussion about the potential viability of that. And I think it would be really helpful for Waka Kotahi just to have a position, which we've heard today, which has been really great. But I'd really like to see that position perhaps in writing and expressed through the local media channels. I think that would be really helpful. That would probably just assist us as councillors in being able to qualify why or why not and where we are at with things. So particularly through our local chambers of commerce, it's just very topical. So that would be really, really helpful if that was possible. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. I'll take that on board. I think one of the challenges with this, and it's the challenge with any of our networks, is when we put in place a network, development occurs, and then the way people use that network changes and new pressures evolve, right? And that's where I think it's critical that we have this central government, local government relationship that talks about what your long-term thinking is and what ours is, and how does that evolve? And I mean, that's the beauty of future-proof and smart growth and those growth forums that we've got. But yeah, we do. I take that on board. Yeah, I'll talk to the team about what we can do in terms of a more formal message.
Thanks, David. Graham.
Good morning, David. I knew we'd meet up again.
Morning, Graham.
I'm pretty sure you can answer this. The objection to the roundabout at Pairiri in the Environment Court, was that just for taking the land for the roundabout, or was the objection to the motorway coming down through their farm as well? Was it two things or just the roundabout?
I'm not sure how much I can say because it's still in the court process. So what I can say is it's complicated. It's not a simple one issue thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Any other comments, questions? Doesn't appear so, David. Hey, thanks for the update. Much appreciated. And we'll keep in touch because I've already mentioned it. It is very topical, the transportation issues, particularly around Cambridge. But yeah, your information there, if we can get that out to the public, I think would be really helpful. Just the actual physical constraints of that on and off ramp. Yeah, thanks. Did you want to say something? Yeah, sorry, David. I think we've got another quick question.
Yeah, it's not a question. Just really enjoy having you guys on and updating us and stuff like that. It's a real interest to me personally, anyway. But yeah, I really love hearing from you guys and appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. That's
Thanks,
a pleasure.
David. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks for having us. Kia kite.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillors, next item 3, waste assessment options. Sally. Ooh, don't run.
Just while
There's
Sally
a
takes
health and safety problem. You'll trip over something.
Well, Sally takes her seat. I'll just give you a little bit of background. So obviously, Sally brought us the waste assessment report a few weeks ago. And so now we turn our minds to the response to that information in terms of shaping up how our future waste minimisation and management plan will look as we do that work into 2023. So thanks, Sally.
Thanks, Sally.
Yes.
Hand over to you.
Just try and see it. Is this little clicker working? Oh yeah, there we go. So thank you again for your time this morning, and following on from what Dawn said, we're looking for your feedback and guidance today on what you'd like to pull through from all the options that were presented at the back. And just one of the things for us to keep in mind is that current legislation states that it has to be in our waste minimisation and management plan for us to dedicate our waste levy funding towards those projects and themes. So we want to have it quite broad, but also we want to have some good direction from councillors here today. So don't worry about thinking that if you say you have a preferred proposal and it gets into the waste minimisation management plan, it's going to happen. There'll be often a lot of work that has to be done, but it's just so we have access to that funding to get that work done. If we need to do further business cases or understand issues or waiting for policy and stuff, there's a lot more stuff that could happen. So it doesn't guarantee delivery, but it's just making sure that we can do the work that's needed to be done to understand our issues and options a little bit better. So just for a few people who mightn't have been around back in 2017, before I was even here, seems like forever, Waipa, the team at the time, they did develop a waste strategy. So that waste strategy was to go be an overarching document across 3 WMPs, and we've currently completed one and we're moving into that second phase. And so the purpose of the strategy was to give a bit of an overarching themes across 4 goals, and so each WMP, as we deliver that and do processes, we're meant to go deeper into and have better outcomes on all of our goals, leading towards a zero waste Waipa and sustainable communities. So that also does link in, of course, to our community wellbeings, and the 2 that I think kind of sing out the most is our environmental champions. So just sent an email to some of our volunteers who came to my hazardous waste collection. We do deliver a lot of really good outcomes for the community. I think between the 2 hazardous waste events, we just got the stats from Cambridge this morning, it's 9 tonnes of hazardous waste removed from our district. So that's the kind of stuff where we can proudly say, yes, we are environmental champions. We're putting our money towards and our efforts towards doing these things. And I think there are some good links into socially resilient as well, especially around having a quality place to live. If there's rubbish and recycling and stuff everywhere on the streets, that's not quality. We've seen that overseas when they've hit issues with contracts and rubbish and stuff doesn't get collected. And also around making use of the resources and stuff that we do have, physical resources. So this was in the waste assessment, but I've added a few ticks of where we're at now. So we have done our 2022 assessment. So we're just using that today and in our consideration last time to look at the data, the trends, what are the big issues coming up, what are the service gaps, and then we're going to pull that down into our next WMP, which we'll work on for 6 years, and then we'll repeat this process with anyone who's keen and lucky to have your seat here in 6 years' time. Maybe I'll be here. So yeah, just looking for your feedback to kind of highlight which proposals you like best, so that our resourcing and our aspirations can be aligned. So these are the tables from the end of the waste assessment, and they were just offering a status quo and different proposals of ways that we could tackle those things to achieve the goals that were highlighted, the goals, or to make progress on bigger issues. I have put a red box around the proposal that I personally, from my waste perspective, think is the best one, but I am very open and happy to hear your feedback on which one or which ones you would like to see pull through into the waste minimisation and management plan for further work and direction. So this one is about organic waste. So we know from all our work that organic waste is a large part of our household domestic waste. And there's been a lot of strong indications from government about looking at that. And so, so I propose that we would look to provide a curbside service for that. Yes.
Thanks, Sally. I agree that we should be doing something. I was just wondering about, because there's food and then there's garden waste, green waste. Are you just talking about food, or are you talking about more than that?
That is a tricky one. So the ministry is currently doing some work on looking at what they call FOGO, which is food organic, garden organic, FOGO, or just food organic. So when we looked at all the data, because a large proportion of our community uses prepaid bags, in prepaid bags, only 1.4% around there is garden waste. So it's not a big issue that we're getting out. So if they're using a prepaid bag, they're dealing with that in their own section. They're just leaving the grass clippings there. But people who choose to use a large wheelie bin are putting it all in. So that would be the consideration. And I do think there's other services available for garden waste. So we have a lot of local players. You can get a bag, you can get a wheelie bin, you can get random collections at your high season, or you can get a regular collection. So there is a lot of local players in the garden waste services. But if you tried to Google and get someone to collect your food waste, there's nothing. So that's the reason why I put it at this stage. But again, as things develop, we would definitely be looking towards, what's coming out from the government with their review of,
That's great. Yeah, so I support doing something about food waste, definitely. Although I acknowledge the people that are composting at home with their food waste. Yeah, and so to make that fair. But I just wanted to say about garden waste, like there are opportunities for larger scale composting of garden waste, but really it's best if it's organic, like not full of sprays and chemicals. And so I don't know whether or not we need to start a conversation with our community about should we be moving towards, trying to be an organic or no chemical community, because this will allow us to have more, I suppose, potential businesses, producing organic compost. Yeah. So obviously it's a journey, but
So the regional council is doing some work on pesticides because it is a known issue to secure end markets. So it does become quite tricky when you're getting into that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm along the same lines as Claire to a degree, but I see the proposal to network of community composting hubs. So rather than go to that degree, is there any way in which we could encourage or support home composting? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that perhaps if they understood more about what home composting is, would actually like to get into it. And I don't know whether we've got some way in which we can have a standard home composting system that we could make available at some kind of subsidy or something like that to actually encourage home composting.
Yeah. In the past, I had kind of presented a bit of information on the barriers to composting. So there are quite a lot of barriers to composting, and I don't know, and the cost of the bin is one, but you have to be physically able to turn your compost, and you have to have space to do it, and then somewhere to put the compost. And then there's the whole knowledge component as well. So I think, composting is totally available for anyone to do now, but we just know from our audits, not very many people are composting. And yes, we could encourage that. So I'd say that's more like proposal 4, saying fund a full-time program solely focused on reducing food waste and composting. But I think you have to be realistic about the volumes you'd get and the uptake you'd get from running workshops and doing education. So for example, Auckland Council, I looked up once, they have a team of 22 composting educators of all different ethnicities and language skills working across the area, and they are still doing a food waste collection. And they've had that team for years. Called the,
Instead of the,
I guess it's just
some way in which we can encourage home composting, because that certainly would be a contribution to our objective.
Yeah, would there be a way more to handle the green waste? Yeah, as well. Cool. Any other comments on that one?
Have you got any feedback from the city and how theirs going? Any updates?
Hamilton City Council?
Yeah.
Yes, after that presentation, I did contact them and they have given me some stats, and I've gone back and asked them, can I share these publicly? And he hasn't gone back to me. So you've reminded me, Mayor Jim, I will follow up. They've had a bit of a rocky road because of COVID, and it started and it stopped, and then it started again and it stopped. But I mean, it's very positive. So I will follow up with the contract manager, Scott, that's his name up there. Because I kind of formulated into a report, but I just kind of need his permission to be able to share that with you guys.
That's fine.
Yeah.
It was just whether it was being successful, I suppose, in getting an uptake.
All the services so far in New Zealand still have some way to go of the ultimate amount of food that you could get and what they're getting out. So that bit could definitely go up. So people could recycle, could compost more food items. Like a lot of times they do not put meat and bones and stuff in because of the smell issue, but you can compost that stuff through curbside. So the ministry is starting to look into the foods that are not being captured where there are services available. And then there's like set out rates. So some people only do it every 2 weeks. They might have a little bit of food waste and just chuck it in their rubbish bin, but if they have a lot, they'll put it out. So there is definitely growth for all places, New Plymouth, Raglan, Hamilton, who have Auckland, Papakura, who have food waste services. There's more participation that could be gained and there's more volume that we could get out. Yeah, okay. So tweaks, yeah. And then a big one that's flowed through and is also through the emissions reduction plan is construction and demolition waste, which is about approximately, according to the ministry, half of all waste at landfills. And as we are a high growth area in Waipa, looking to put more of a focus on construction and demolition than we had in our previous WMP, and looking to really support and partnership in those industries.
I think, Sally, I'd be very, very cautious about getting the council involved in that. A lot of the big construction companies now are actually doing it on their own. I mean, it's growing big time. I don't like a business arrangement with private enterprise being, for want of a better word, subsidised or wanted to, by council. I mean, we've got to keep it. It's a legitimate cost that they incur for what they're doing, and I'm very reluctant to see council involved in that. That's only my opinion.
What if it looked like more doing pilots and trials? So, you know, you've got a building site, a typical house build, they've got a skip there, everything goes in. But what if we did a thing where we designed a trailer where they could stack jibs, stack PVC, stack scrap metal, and we trialed something like that? So then we can get the stats and share that with the industry and say, hey, you can still get rid of all your stuff in one spot, but you can do it better like this. Something, it's not us taking on the cost, it's trying to elevate the and to break some of those barriers. You know, it could look like something, I'm just throwing an idea out, that you do like one guy on a truck and he picks up any kind of treated timber that's over this big and it's brought back and it's knotted together and you reused again. So it's stuff, it's just about starting and enabling more than taking on.
Now, Michael saying they've got skips at the construction site. I mean, wood goes in here, concrete goes in here.
You've got a good one. I know, but I'm just saying that you might have a really progressive one, but as a whole, there is some improvements to be made, but we have been a bit hamstrung, I believe, by, you know, the government hasn't provided us or any industries in our area the support for infrastructure, but there is a couple coming through that we're hearing about, construction and demolition sorting, post-sorting. Yep.
As a little bit adding towards that, at least it's a step. Is it not right that EnviroWest, in the reopening of the transfer station, have extended their service provision, so they're now accepting timber
Yes.
to look at recycling
Yes.
that timber. So that's a step in the right direction.
So, and I did check with them, and that is treated timber as well as non-treated, which is really, really good. But it'd be, for example, if they came to us and said, oh, that's going really well, we want to get a shipping container behind and sell some of that wood, and we need racking. That's the kind of project I would say, yeah, sure, we could support the container, but we'll still own it. But you can use it and have a shop or racking, and just to enable more change.
Yeah, I'm really in support of it too. And I heard too that a big barrier to builders not recycling more is that there are rules that they can only have one rubbish skip per site. I don't know if I've raised this with you before, and I don't know if it applies here in Waipa. My daughter in Wellington said that happened there. And so if they had material that was new, like offcuts and stuff, but they couldn't reuse on their building site, it all had to go in the rubbish skip. And so they said an option would be to allow 2 skips, one obviously for rubbish, but one for recyclable material. And so I don't know if that's a barrier here, but I think it was a really good suggestion.
Okay, I'll follow that up with Julie from the transport team. I think it'd mostly be, you can have whatever you want on your site, but you just can't go out onto the road and start stacking up skip bins down the road. So I think that's where a rule might be, but I'm unaware of what our rule would be. And a lot of the time with the construction and demolition, there's peaks and troughs. So when they're framing, it's wood. And when they're fitting out the inside, it's jib. So, there's chances to, move things around. And if you've got a lot of scale as well, you can have a centralized place where they'd bring it to. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and I'm keeping my eye on everything. So, yeah.
Sally, just a quick question. How far away is we call jib or plasterboard recycling? Because that, I think, is quite an essential thing that they're predicting, that we're going to be able to recycle plasterboard to be able to recreate more plasterboard.
Yeah.
How far away is that?
I'm not sure. I haven't. Jib is starting a factory over in Tauranga, so I'm not sure. I haven't heard from anything about that lately. I can follow up and let you know. Jib.
The interesting thing is that jib is actually a brand name from Fletcher's. So we can call it plasterboard because it's actually, because there are imports coming in now quite significantly.
Which is good.
And they are called other names.
Yeah. So currently, plasterboard can be reused into a fertilizer. And so it can be shipped to Tuako, and that can happen up there. But obviously it's better to send it back to the company cool. So would you overall endorse that support and partnership?
It's such a significant part of the waste stream.
Yes.
Certainly, it's really important.
Okay.
Important one.
Right. Cool. And always my hot topic, reducing contamination from our recycling service. We really just want to keep doing what we're doing here. We're restarting the audits. We want to keep advocating to central government for national recycling rules. So if you're in Whitianga, Whangarei, here, wherever, it's all the same rules about what can be recycled and how it should be presented. And also looking across our contract and see what we could try and do there to try and encourage them when staffing issues and health sickness aren't such an issue and they have a bigger team, to see if we can do any post-sorting of our first run of contamination, which we have done in the past. So that's just running it through again. So just pretty much going to keep that as a really wide one. DB. Yep.
Is there any indication that it's improving, Sally? I know you haven't.
Right now, I don't think so. Because we did manage to get a little bit of a decrease when we had the bin auditors out, but there's been a gap. So some of those bad ones are coming back in, but I do believe the bin auditing is the key. And so Jenny's just set us a pre-contract meeting to get them going again. And they're going to be using the same lady from last time. So she's very experienced. So I'm very positive about that. Yep. Tick, tick, tick. Okay, cool. If they ever contacted us, we would. We haven't got a process for door knocking. And I guess a lot of people aren't there, but sometimes if they see them standing there and taking a photo, people do, oh, what's going on out here? And that is a great opportunity. And we obviously always want to make that a oh, here's what you need to learn, and it's non-combative because we don't want to get into any issues like that. But we actually have redesigned our tag. It used to be a sticker, so it was stuck to the bin, but now we've actually made a tag that can attach the handle so they can take it off and come inside. They've got our phone number, they've got a QR code, they've got a website, so they could scan it and go straight to our golden rules for recycling. So we're trying to make it easier for them to engage with us, but they'll be getting letters in their letterboxes, the really bad ones, the ones who are doing bad recycling, I should say. So they can always contact us, but often they don't. Yeah. Cool. And this is looking at the policy and administrative and advocacy options. So something that's been in our WMP that we haven't progressed too far is licensing our waste operators, but it seems that the government is realising it's actually better for them to license about 5 companies than 70 councils to license 5 companies. So we're hoping that that's what will happen, and if not nationally, at least regionally or cross-regionally. And if that doesn't happen, we will have to use our bylaw to enact licensing locally. And then really starting to focus on the circular economy and starting to engage our businesses and our services in that, and using mostly education at the start. It was the proposals.
Quick call to you, Sally. If we do actually local licensing, that would be a cost to us. There's quite a cost involved in that.
Yeah.
So we would have, and in this current economic climate, I'd be a little bit wary of that, because we would have to then monitor those people that we license. Would that be correct?
Correct. So of course, Auckland's much bigger, but they have somebody working full time on their licensing, because you have to check all their data, you have to follow up with them if they don't supply it, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't make sense to do it that way. And I really, really strongly push to the government that they should be doing it, because there's only a few companies and they cross our boundaries all the time. Yeah. Any further comments on that? Okay. And then infrastructure. So this has been highlighted recently with the, quite long closure of the transfer station in Cambridge. We don't own any waste infrastructure directly. We have the one resource recovery centre, which is in the current LTP and is on the table for maybe fast tracking. So, but it's I'm putting forward that we look to plan for a network of resource recovery centres. So we don't just have one. Both our townships would have them, but also that there could be feeder sites or some other solution for our rural villages and smaller spots.
I think part of that particular environment is the urban miners and the success that they've been, and certainly although we don't mention it specifically, then I think the ongoing support by council of that particular facility and service somehow would be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just a quick question to you again. Sorry about all this, but just improved planning for disaster waste. Are we connecting with that, with the Joint Committee for civil defence? Because that would overlap a little bit in the recovery sector, particularly that we need to have some overview of what is available and coordinate that over the whole area, because we'd have these disasters could relate to a number of areas outside our own workload.
Yes, I'll definitely be engaging with Dave. I've already mentioned it to him, but we haven't actually connected. So at the moment, if we were unfortunate like Nelson, we'd be scrambling like they have been and like trying to figure out where we're putting this stuff. So the plan is to go ahead and actually plan for these kind of disasters. We're expecting this kind of tonnage of these kinds of wastes, and we might put them there, and we might even go as far as to get into contractual arrangements with large waste players who've got the equipment, the skips, everything we'd need to put in place. It's to try and shorten up that time frame between, oh my goodness, that's wow, and we're actually getting stuff cleaned up off the streets. Yeah, so I'm working along with the project group on that. It's a cross-regional project, and CoLab is looking to host the online GIS platform for us. So and we will be able to do that modelling and actually have that plan in place that we would be able to sit at the table and go, here we go, to civil defence and emergency management.
So that'd be acceptable, because I think that we do need to do that work or cooperate with that.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. Any other feedback or
just a comment on the network of resource recovery centres. What's your anticipation? You mentioned in all of the small villages, etc. there's a cost, obviously, and is there any evidence that I can imagine one in Te Awamutu and one in Cambridge or east and west side of the district, but is it, I suppose, financially viable to actually be contemplating setting these up in small communities? Is there sufficient waste generated, and should they not be expected to put it in the trailer or whatever they've got to do and get it to the centre rather than trying to spread them out?
And that's the bit Jim would do the more work.
Yeah.
So, but it could be something like there's just a one-off time that urban miners goes to Parongia, for example, because if they have kids sports and they can't ever make it here, or it might be we could do it as an event based, but the Te Awamutu one would go out to Parongia and say, we're collecting scrap metal here today, and they collect it all and bring it back. It's just all that stuff would be the detail that we'd want to flesh out. But I just want to raise it, as we're thinking about growth in our rural areas, getting a little bit of space that is, would be available is sometimes hard. So just like keeping it on, putting it forward as, something to consider for growth as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Very valid point. I think being a member of Rotary, I might take it back to Mark and Bloody and suggest that they may look at doing a one-off in some of the village areas. I'm sure they would be receptive to that.
Yeah, and that would be a bit of expansion that I'd be happy to consider again for funding. Yeah.
One of the limitations of that is to volunteers of staff. We're already operating 2 collections a month. All right, so we are out there and we're available on a regular basis. And we had the last collection was 2 Sundays ago, and from Te Awamutu, and we had an exceptional. We had over 80 kilograms of batteries. These are small batteries, 80 kilograms. And I'm just saying,
you wonder where it all comes from, don't you? You wonder where it all comes from.
I know.
They collect them in the buckets.
I just thought what would happen is if you take it to other areas, like smaller areas around, you've got to advertise, you've got to put all the infrastructure in place. And that is the difficulty. Having a centralised site that people can identify with is, I think, a lot simpler for everybody. And they know it's at Te Awamutu Sports in the car park. They drive past, they see it and utilise that. And coming from Parongia or Kiki or a Hapo even isn't that far.
Yeah, I think we wouldn't want to put anything on the table, but it could be something where, maybe there's a bin there that a cafe looks after and they take the money and give to, there's lots of different solutions, but we just, I just don't want our more distant places to be left out. Okay, cool. And the last one, and rubbish provision. So this is just pretty much putting it out there that maybe we need to do the work similar to what we did with the food waste to see what council contract for rubbish provision could look like service-wise. So how we could do that for the rural community, some of which have had a kind of a withdrawal of services over the past 6 years, but also what it will cost, because recent contracts that have actually been struck are indicating that it could be significantly cheaper than private waste and our council recycling. So that's the proposal there for us to look at that and consider that. And with the timeline of thinking, I think we have 4 years left on our recycling contract that you would do them if we decided to do it at the same time.
Sally, one of the issues that's always come up with the council funded services, how do we make it equitable? Have you got a comment on that?
There has been some councils, so Western Bay, so they've just done a brand new contract. So they have a wheelie bin, a large recycling bin like ours. I think they have a crate for glass, which is collected weekly, not monthly, and a curbside food waste bin. They have an overall waste charge for all of those things. And then you have to buy tags to add to your rubbish bin. So the tag is, not a huge amount, but so if you put out your rubbish bin like Claire would be once every 6 months, I'd probably be monthly. I don't know, I'm not going to point who's going to have a lot of waste, but you'd buy a tag. So it's a kind of a pay as you throw. So there's a lot of work in that space at the moment, or we could seek a contract that still has prepaid bags, or not prepaid. Well, like in Raglan, it's the same. You pay a waste charge and you do pay per bag. Or you could do like Marlborough, they give every household, they post out 52 bags. And then if you run out of those in June, you've got to come in here and buy yours or buy it at the supermarket. So there is ways to add user pays. But the flip side and the consideration of that is the more you charge for rubbish, the more likely they're going to chuck it in the recycling bin. So that's where the investigation and further work needs to happen. But there is elements of pay as you, we call it pay as you throw. Yeah.
Sally, I do agree with looking at council providing this service, whatever form it might take, because I just think, you know, the risk that private contractors are facing with, well, there's so many things that can impact the viability of a service. If you take a purely commercial view, yeah, and because I think it's really important for us to be processing rubbish, yeah, correctly. I do see it's probably going to end up with councils anyway, because yeah, just because of the risks. If we want to cover it off really well, that yeah, it's probably going to have to end up at the council.
Yeah, we are one of the few councils who doesn't have a rubbish service. Yeah, and I was going to say as well, with the increasing waste levy, you know, the prices will be going up. So it's like trying to get a council contract, and it's a little bit simpler than recycling because it's rubbish. You just take everything. There's no such thing as contamination in rubbish. It is already rubbish. So that's a little bit of an alleviating of our increasing fear of increasing costs. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a little bit like Gary. I think the cost of it, you've got to be a wee bit careful with the cost. I do think that we want to actually accelerate the idea of having the private organisations that are like, well, I'm just going to use urban miners again, sorry, so I work with them, but they are a volunteer organisation, right? They're not for profit and they would need a subsidisation, but they're looking at expansion at the moment into whiteware and into having a look at air conditioning units, and all of these areas can be expanded into, but they do need capital and assistance. And, you know, if we can look at that sort of thing as well, in conjunction with your waste services, I think we would get a great benefit out of it. There is a real problem, areas where we are looking at a lot of people with whiteware, etc. We had 4 washing machines last collection. We had to turn away.
Yeah. So I do want to just state with the urban miners thing that e-waste is a compulsory product stewardship scheme. So the government is going to be, when you buy that washing machine new, you're going to be paying $15, and you just, that the recycling cost is taken care of, and it'll go back to the source or to an urban miners situation. So then they'll be officially be able to recoup that money, and they won't be asking the customer. So that is covered and that is coming. So I feel our role, well, the role of waste minimisation team and funding was to get them up and going. And I feel we've done that through a couple of quite, you know, I think I worked out they've probably had about 20% of our funding for the past 2 years of our waste, 40,000 each year we do. And I do know they've just recently lowered their pricing, which I advised them not to do because I wanted them to maintain the pricing and use that money for their own investment. So there is a lot there that we can't, it has to be a standalone. I can't just do one service again and again, or else there's no other room for other people to get funding. But I think the main thing with urban miners, we want to keep supporting them till we get to the point where the money is coming through product stewardship and they'll be getting paid the real money, because everyone who buys an electronic item will be paying that up front. But that is completely separate to what we were just talking about of rubbish provision. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay.
No, that's excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. And I think that's me.
Yeah.
So the next step is I'm just going to be pulling those projects that you've just endorsed. So thank you very much. And I've got your extra ideas through into a waste minimisation and management plan. So that'll be a couple of months coming, and we will present that to the new incoming council and get your approval, and then go through the normal process of consulting with our community and presenting their feedback here as well. And then the aim is to hopefully have this adopted by the 30th of June, because I want to align with the council year. But if we can't make that happen time-wise, we do have till October, which is when our current WMP is dated. So that's our timeline. And that's me, unless there's any further comments.
Any other quick comments? Gary, you're right. Thanks.
No, I just really appreciate the energy that you bring to this, Sally. So
yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Item off. Better off funding, Peter. You need anything?
Petering, yeah. So folks, the first critical decision, and Roger alluded to it earlier, is the funding is available and council needs to decide whether it wishes to take those funds. So we've done a survey, not a huge amount of respondents, 92, but you get a sense of where the public is sitting. So just bear that in mind. So I just didn't want you to think that we put the horse before the cart. But Peter, over to you and Gary to work through your presentation.
Morena, good morning, Your Worship, councils, Chief Executive. So Gary and I are here this morning to give you this presentation, and it's following up obviously on the issues that were covered off at the 26th of July meeting, and then filling in the gaps since we've undertaken community consultation and also consultation with Mana Whenua and iwi, and then coming and looking at the shortlisted projects that we had and mixing that in with the feedback that we've received, and looking for your guidance as we head towards the Service Delivery Committee meeting next week. So I'll go through the presentation. Gary's here with me, been involved obviously closely with particularly the Mana Whenua and iwi engagement, and happy to take questions as we go through. So that's just what I've told you. That's good. So one of the issues that came up on the 26th of July was the issue around the funding agreement. So part of applying for tranche 1 funding, the 5.24 million, involves us lodging a funding proposal with the DIA, but also signing a funding agreement. And the funding agreement had a clause which was wanted to be questioned or potentially removed, so that it didn't, there was no chance of the signing the agreement limiting, I think, the council's ability to express its views around the Three Waters reforms, or the community to express their views. So there's been an exchange of letters between the mayor and executive from DIA. They've clarified in writing that there is no limitation, that there would be no breach of an agreement if there was a negative public expression of opinion around the reforms. And so they've said, based on that, they wouldn't be removing this clause 4.3C5. So that's really just.
Can I ask a question on that? I can understand the clause about expressing an opinion, right? And they've said that we have the freedom to express that opinion. But what came through, my understanding, in that last briefing we had, that the advice was to us that in signing that agreement, that actually there was a legal obligation to support and go with the Three Waters. That was written in the staff advice to us at that time. They're two different aspects. So what I'm wanting to know is that statement that the staff made in that original paper correct? Do we have, having signed that agreement, do we have a legal obligation to continue with Three Waters?
So I think that was highlighted in the report, and but the clarification that's been sought from the DIA and has been given in writing.
No, I'm sorry, I'm going to.
Well, I can't give you a legal opinion on this.
You can't, or you can?
No, I can't. That's not my field of expertise.
I think the question of whether we can openly criticise or whether we're legally obligated, they are two totally separate issues. And the only response that we've got is on whether we can openly criticise. So there's been no contradiction to the advice that we originally given that we're legally obligated to go with 3 waters.
Gary.
So the legislation is passing through the House, Roger. That means we are legally obligated. Unless the legislation changes, we're legally obliged to comply with legislation.
Yeah, that's certainly my understanding, that once the legislation is passed, then that legal obligation is there. But what we didn't want was the inability to carry on expressing our views, which were critical of the legislation.
But it hasn't gone through yet, so it's not law at this point in time.
No, it's we've just been through the select committee process. They've received comments from throughout the country. Whether there's any changes to that legislation, it's a really difficult situation, isn't it? Because effectively you would expect legislation to be in place before all of the action happened on the ground. Effectively, the transfer of these assets and setting up the infrastructure for the new Four Waters entity has carried on regardless of the select committee process and seeking community input. So yeah, you can read into that the decision's already made, and it might be a little bit of tweaking is all we're going to get. So that's the position as I understand it. The legislation still hasn't been cast in concrete, but the indications are that it's carrying on as was indicated at the very beginning.
Carry on.
Yeah.
So just going to community engagement. So we did an online survey for the 2 weeks ending on the 2nd of September, raising questions around whether the council should actually apply for the Tranche 1 funding now or let it roll over, so that Tranche 2 and Tranche 1 would be available in 2024 together, or not apply it for any of the Tranche 1 or Tranche 2 funding at all. And for people who were in favour of applying now, they were taken to a next question, which was to rank projects that were shortlisted by the council on the July meeting. And so the results are there. So the green bar at the top is showing the proportion of respondents. 92 people answered this online survey. They were available in hard copy also at council offices. So out of the 92, there were 42 who said apply now. There were 21 responses which said perhaps don't apply now, but let it roll over so that the tranches can be applied for together at a later date. And there were 29 of the 92 people who said don't apply for anything at any time ever, effectively. And then we had the, as I said, the people who responded positively to applying for Tranche 1 funding were able to rank in order for up to any number of projects they wish to rank. And those are the results from the 7 projects. So the Resource Recovery Centre just being slightly ahead of TROI, and then we have the Urban Mobility Network and Te Aomotu, Naroto, Parangia, Cycleway, Cambridge Library Feasibility Study, and Urban Lighting, and finally the Lake Naroto Management Plan Heritage Restoration Project at the bottom.
Yeah, jump in at this point here. So I do struggle a little bit with 92 respondents, simply because when I look at what would be a reasonable number of respondents for me to really gauge a proper kind of outcome or feel that we've had the appropriate number of responses. I'd be looking for the 400 to 500. That would give me a real sense of security that we're hitting the, or have the community's opinions well canvassed. So I appreciate this is we can't change this number now, but I guess I just sort of highlighting for me, I'm quite a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not saying it's not the right direction. I'm just saying that for me, the number has been quite disappointing.
So yeah, just one comment on that. I agree. I would have thought we would have had more feedback. Just remembering that all of these projects are in the current LTP, so they have been tested through the LTP process, accepting that the Resource Recovery Centre was year 4, I think. So out beyond this 3-year triennium, but there has been some testing of these projects pre the survey.
Yeah, and I suppose this whole issue is I was going to say rushed, we haven't really had the time, but to do a statistically accurate sample would have been the way to go, to select people randomly rather than rely on people just coming back, because obviously people are stimulated by different reasons, I suppose, to actually make some submissions rather than if it's randomly selected in a proper survey. So timing hasn't been with us on this one, which has been a challenge. Yeah, Roger.
Could I just go back to the previous page and just point out where you say that you've got a larger number of people that say we should go for funding. It's 45%, but really either against it or not making a decision for another 2 years when we have legal certainty that we've got to, actually is over 50%. So I'd suggest to you that the majority or the higher percentage of our population do not want us to make this decision at this time because of the political uncertainty of the situation. So I can't see how we can accept that we're given a mandate by that small percent, well, the lesser percentage of the population, irrespective of how they wish to think about spending it. So we're talking about a smaller percentage having said they wouldn't mind it, but then an even smaller group giving us a priority on where we should spend it. To me, that's not good decision making. It's not good governance.
Yeah, I'll just comment then and I'll come to you, Bill. I think at the end of the day, Roger, it's an indication only, and we acknowledge that it's not a statistically accurate poll. And we are going to, around this table, have to make that decision based on the information that we've got. And look, I think it's just another piece of information that indicates where the community's sitting, but I don't think we can decide based on that whether it's, whether it's for or against, to be fair.
And
we're going to have to make that.
I can only go. I've been walking around knocking on houses and talking, and the majority of people have come to me and said they don't want a bar of 3 waters.
Yeah, and look, don't disagree with that, Bill.
Yeah, I just thanks, Peter, and thanks, Jim. I'd just like to point out there is another section to come after this one, Roger, in which the mana whenua voice is being expressed. So these statistics don't actually have the mana whenua expression in them. I'd make that comment because mana whenua were quite clear in terms of the two hui that we held, both in terms of Ngāiwi, Tōpu and ICC, which are being reported upon here. And yeah, it depended upon what the priorities were. The fact that we weren't part of the process for identifying the priorities was something that was raised by mana whenua as well, and the iwi Consultative Committee. It was made at this table without the Kānohi present. I don't think that this is, statistically correct. I totally agree with that, because on the Thursday prior to this closing, I said, well, do you want me to put in a submission from Ngāti Apakura, which would have changed these outcomes as well. So yeah, I think we should take the whole report, and the mana whenua position, iwi position should be considered in this debate, in this conversation.
Yeah. Mike.
Yeah, I think to me, I'm going to liken this to a conscience vote when it comes to it, basically. And as you've alluded to, Jim, it's based on all the information that we've gathered as individuals, and none of it's perfect. And the thing is, when you talk to people, often we talk to like-minded people. That's why we always get an affirmation of our view. It's quite easy to do. So yeah, hey, it'll be a conscience vote, and then we've got a week or so to make it.
Thanks, Mike. Claire.
Yeah, I was just going to talk to Roger's point about if you look at the people who are voting against it, it's a majority that are voting against it. Yeah, but because I mean, I wasn't in favour of taking up the tranche one money at all myself personally, but you know, the difference even between the positives and the negatives is still so close. Yeah, I think it has to be a conscience vote really, or just, yeah, making the best decision with the information we have. I wouldn't say there's a clear direction at all. Yeah, it is a bit disappointing that there wasn't more response from the community, but that's what we've got.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Peter. Oh, sorry, Mike.
Sorry, just to add to that, I mean, we settle out that this is all there is, but we've actually got another few days. Is there any way we could go back and really try and drum up and get some more people involved in this? Because I don't know how many ratepayers we have, 20,000 or something. This is like 0.5%.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't see you at it anymore.
Without wanting to burst anyone's bubble, I don't think you're ever going to get a good response to a survey of this type. This is a really complex issue, really complex, and to ask people to go in and talk about tranche one funding, you know, oh, you've probably lost them already, then to go in and actually ask them to talk to rank 7 projects. I mean, to be honest, I'm almost surprised you at this much, and it was never something I would have recommended as somebody who used to own a research company. It was sent out media releases. We did Facebook posts. I don't know how many elected members shared it on your own Facebook pages, but that would have helped if you had, possibly. We did print advertising and we did Facebook advertising. It's blood out of a stone. I don't want to, you know, I would also make a comment around statistically correct. No, the magic number is 397. It's not a statistically correct sample. It's just, as Mayor Jim said, a reflection. So I don't want to be negative, guys, but you don't pay me to be nice.
Well, I put on this one. Peter.
Well, seeing as this is the detailed slide, we'll probably just skip over it then. Right, good. Okay, we'll move on then to the engagement with mana whenua and iwi. And yes, we had 2 meetings with the iwi taupu Waipae on Monday week ago, and then the ICC on 7th of September. And those questions were generally put in conversation, not the way they're written on the page there. But I guess the important difference in this engagement was that it was engagement. It wasn't survey feedback. So with the proper engagement comes a wholesome debate and discussion around all issues that are of interest to mana whenua and iwi, not just 7 projects. However, there was feedback on the 7 shortlisted projects as well. So if you look at the combined feedback from those 2 meetings and 2 discussions, there was a very strong priority and the highest priority given to advancing work on the draft plan change 23, which is Papakainga residential developments in Waipau and Maori land. And at the committee meeting, they resolved to request that funding for Papakainga Plan Change 23 should be a top priority for Tranche 1 Better Off funding. So more could be conveyed on this probably by Gary and potentially by Bill. But I guess my comment on this was not just priority, but a sense of urgency to really do something around draft plan change 23 and to get it moving forward and to get the operative plan in a position where iwi have the ability then to bring forward development proposals that can actually go into some physical fruition for housing for the people. And it also creates money very readily available. So once the funding proposal, if it was to be submitted at the end of September and approved, pretty quick turnaround is expected with the IA to give approval, then the money is available. It doesn't have to be subject to any other further process. So I think that's a notable issue and advantage that iwi would see with this. So then we had some work done in between meetings, if you like, around what the cost of progressing this plan change would be. And we've worked with Tony Quickfall and in terms of making sure that the budget's accurate. So some of that work has started. There has been a small engagement done to commence that work, but there are no additional budgets in the current LTP. So it would appear that a cost of an estimate of around 350,000, that's predominantly using external resources, would be required to undertake this project. We think that that clearly passes one of the DIA criteria for better off funding. And given that it's not currently funded in the LTP, that would make this like a newly funded project and eligible for better off funding as well.
Yeah, like I'm sure that when we had this discussion about what projects would go in, that Papakainga was a possibility at that time, but I thought that only the projects that council was eligible to put forward already had to be in the LTP, but not in the first 3 years. Or was that to cover off the public consultation side of things?
Yes, Claire, that's mainly the public consultation side of things. This is the caveat from DIA is that council had to engage with mana whenua when it came to looking at this tranche. Wayne may wish to comment. There was an intention to fund Papakainga, as I recall, through the general sort of policy funding budgets.
Yeah.
But they've been eaten up by things like you must process plan change 26. That's a $900,000 bill or thereabouts. So to the extent that we've got policy funds set aside, they've really been chewed up by central government mandates.
Yeah, and so I just like to get that clarification of the fact that mana whenua weren't constrained by what was in the LTP, that they were free to choose whatever they thought was a priority for them. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Bill.
Thanks, Jim. Kia ora, Peter and Gary. Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Claire. It was correct, and I understand that there has been ongoing conversations now, because for mana whenua we've been, and I think we sort of heard this yesterday, have been for years trying to get these plan changes through, and it's slidden further back. And so it was deemed to be unfair that because of it sliding, this wasn't considered for this tranche of money. If that had continued to be the case, mana whenua probably would have opted for the second, putting the two tranches together, because that's the only way that we could have got the timeframes we needed in terms of the money that is on offer in terms of better off funding. But we believe that by doing it this way, we can move the necessary work into tranche one, and that will give us a time frame that we can move to utilise other funding for housing. And what I mean by other funding is that I know that there's a project that's been sitting for some time now with funding to do the build, but because of the lack of the plan change, it's not occurred. And so that group, that mana whenua group, have been hamstrung by the fact that, you know, the funding at this table hasn't been able to be utilised to progress that. And that was probably the biggest message, is that, yeah, it's been on mana whenua iwi's table for a long period of time, and we've been talking and talking and talking about it, but it hasn't been progressed in the rule change. So that's what we want to do, and we can, you know, as Peter said, we can bring funding to it, and we can get some houses built before this project runs out and there's no money available. Just yeah.
Thanks, Bill. I'll go to you, Roger, and then I'll just ask. I've got a question for Gary.
I think after yesterday's meeting, the commitment, the feeling of those gathered was progressing, actually understanding, first of all, what papakāinga is, and then progressing it came through as a very strong directive. I actually see the support of papakāinga actually different to the decision that we've got to make now. I think we should acknowledge and progress that anyway, whether we go ahead with the tranche 1 funding or not. Yeah. So I would prefer not to see those two linked.
Thanks, Roger. That was part of the question I was going to ask Gary, but Liz, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing. I just think that we should be treating that separately. We should be prioritising it, and Gary, you know how to make this happen, so I'll leave you to find a path, I suppose.
That's probably answered the question, because what I was going to say to Gary was the papakāinga issue, if it was as business as usual, how should it be funded? And it's not waiting for an external source of money that may or may not come. Gary.
So traditionally we fund district plan measures via loan. If the plan has a life of 10 years, so we've funded over 10 years. You'll shortly get a report from Wayne's group about Plan Change 26, which is the building intensification mandate from central government, or edict. Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's in the vicinity of 900K. And so normally we would loan fund a project like this over 10 years. So rough water costs about 30K per year as an operating cost.
Yeah, just for you, Chair. Just following on, that's correct, Gary. So I did highlight that to the councillors this morning, that there's a council report coming through relating to PC 26 and additional funding request. So yes, the comments about the papakāinga plan change, so yeah, they're quite real. The plan change has been on the table for some time now. We did find the funding for the first tranche of work, which has produced the initial report from James Fetu. But the second tranche, actually doing the plan change itself, is not funded, and there's only two options. One is through getting some funding through this tranche of money through waters, or secondly through loan funding, as Gary was indicating. So that's essentially it. We do want to progress this plan change. The existing funds are really under pressure given PC 26 issues I've just mentioned and other plan change priorities that we've got. So papakāinga is a priority as well, but we just need the funding, and I guess some in your hands about whether it's loan funded or through this process.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Wayne. So I think probably around the table it's generally accepted that the papakāinga plan change is a priority, and it doesn't necessarily, and I don't think iwi have got any wish for it to come from any specific pot of money, just as long as the job gets done. So if we can sort of bear that in the back of our minds when we're having this discussion, that change needs to happen, but it doesn't necessarily have to complicate the issue that we're talking about now. Fair comment?
Jim, if this goes through, what are the effects on the other private landowners in the district? Is it a major?
What private landowners?
The other people that own property out there.
Well, that's what would come out of the plan change, the public consultation and everything that's associated with the plan change will identify those issues.
We can only give guidance from this workshop. But
yeah, I appreciate that.
If your guidance is to ask me to look at advancing plan change 26, we can add that to the report that will be coming to you on the 30th at the same time as plan change 26. So that would suggest loan funding, and I would need to find the funds to do that.
Yeah, I think that's general support. Claire?
I mean, I'd certainly support the Papakāinga plan change, but I'm concerned about the, constraints that the planning team have, with staffing and even external contractors, and that even though you might find the funding, that it's still going to be very difficult to progress it. I mean, I was happy with it as part of the shortlisted projects, because I don't know if finding money elsewhere is actually going to make it easier to make it happen.
Well, so there is a resource available, Wayne, as I understand, to do plan change on Papakāinga. We have a background report that's already been prepared on it. We've got the Ahuaki work that is proceeding. And so those two things would come together quite nicely. I'm sure there's a funding mechanism that's available to get us through to the next LTP.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thanks for that. That's very helpful. So then just on to the shortlisted projects and the responses that we had on that. So it was very clear from those shortlisted projects that Te Arawai was the number one priority. It was stated and restated several times. There was also a high priority for the Lake Naroto or Roto management plan heritage restoration work, and that's work specifically identified in years 4 to 8 of the long-term plan in terms of what's being proposed here. And then there was some priority interest indicated for other projects, and notably the Resource Recovery Centre development and the Urban Mobility Network program. And a general comment, which is at the bottom of the screen there, that all of the 7 projects were seen as of value and good to be on a council long-term plan list. So next slide is
yeah.
If I might just comment, if you don't mind, on Wairoto or Ngāroto. Just remembering that that's a waihi tapu site. So we see it as a waihi tapu site. It's where, of course, a number of Ngāti Apakura and Hinatu were driven into the lake by Ngāti Hoa, 3,000 against 10,000. And so there are bones in Wairoto, Ngāroto. So that's, I'm just trying to give you a picture of why it's more significant in terms of the priority for mana whenua iwi. Kia ora. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, so then... sorry, just going to this list of projects, I still question the validity of this stating that those are the priority when it's again driven from such a low number of the people. And certainly I'm getting a feedback that perhaps the funding towards Te Arawai is not seen as an appropriate allocation of funding into a specific project that many people see as a Te Awamutu based project. And that's just expressing the view that's been shared with me.
Yeah, clear.
I'm really surprised to hear that, Roger, because it is clearly a Waipa project. well, when you look at the stories that are told in it, yeah.
I'm a great believer in heritage history, really.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So perhaps you're referring to the building itself.
Referring to at this point in time, the investment. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, that's always going to be difficult, isn't it, if it's going to be located in a particular community. Yeah.
So the figures on the schedule are the dollars that were alongside of these projects in the long-term plan.
Correct.
So correct. Effectively, these figures here on this table, it's the next one that is suggesting the allocation. But this total list is what was identified through the long-term plan and approved. So that level of funding is there. Well, identified for coming up in the future. So that's the reason there's quite significant numbers in there.
Yep, Your Worship. Just quickly, have those figures been adjusted for inflation? Because that is a critical factor. We're now facing quite significant inflation, and we need to adjust those figures if they need.
Peter, my understanding is no, they haven't. None of our figures in the LTP are adjusted for inflation. Gary?
Shane Ken isn't here. I just need to check that with the finance team because we have made assumptions in the LTP about inflation. Of course, we know inflation is extended ahead of that. So I think you can assume that prices have increased beyond inflation that we're allowed for in the LTP. Yeah.
I think the original LTP had something like 2.43% inflation built in, something along that line.
I'll just check it.
So just quickly, my understanding is that the staff went through our 10-year plan, basically looking for projects that would fit the funding criteria set by DIA. Out of that, they came up with a list of, at the time, it was these 7 projects would fit the criteria, and that's why they ended up on the list. Then there's been some sorting of that list in terms of public feedback, feedback from iwi. So, but the list was really just a list of possibilities that could be funded, meeting the criteria and to meet the timeframes that we had to actually lodge the request. That's a summary of where we're at. Yeah.
We should also just probably worth acknowledging that some of those projects had unfunded components or that were funded to be fundraised, and that would include Te Arawai and the Te Awamutu Karongia Cycleway.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Bill.
Kia ora. I just wanted to acknowledge what Roger said about, you are in history and culture and all of that, Roger. I totally understand that. But if I could just say for mana whenua and iwi, there's a lot of taonga that aren't on display often enough for us. And that's no criticism of the museum staff. I think it's more of a criticism of the space. When I'm talking that, I'm not just talking about those localised to Tiamutu. I'm talking about Karoki Kahukura, Rokawa. I've just given you a bit of the history for Rokawa for Ngāti Hara and Apakura. And some of those don't even exist in Tiamutu. They don't even exist in our rohi. And I sense that you understand that, but that's what I'm sort of signalling to you, that, you've got, people are drawn to presently, Māori are drawn presently to the Tiamutu Museum. Unuku. Unuku is there it was placed there by the Māori king, and remains there by the Māori king. But we would like to have a few more of those brought home and to be on display as well. And I would think that that is a display that people like yourself and that understand history, Roger, would love to see, be it in Cambridge, be it in Tiamutu, be it out at Rangiaowhia, if I can do that. But that's probably why we have supported Te Arawai in this process.
Thanks for that acknowledgement, Bill. I mean, and I'm now no longer on the museum committee, so I've not got a conflict of interest anymore, but we had exactly the same challenges with lack of space for displaying Taonga, both iwi and European in the Cambridge Museum. But I just think in today's age where the pressures are really on our community, that I think investing at this point of time in a museum is actually not the best use of funds. And I think there are many areas across the whole district where we could see the investment in those to a greater social benefit for our people across the district. That's essentially what my view is coming on that.
Gary?
I probably need to comment here. Te Arawai was the subject of an extensive consultation process. I think we put on 28 buses and took the public and showed them the national story that sits behind the New Zealand land wars. And to the extent that it is a discretionary project, I've not seen one with such a huge amount of support through an LTP process. So that's just putting some context out there. I certainly understand your point, Roger, in terms of the current economy. To Lou's point, the figures in the LTP were all inflation adjusted from 2020 bill estimates. So there has been inflation in the LTP, but not to the quantum we've experienced in the last little while.
Just comment on the Te Arawai project as a museum, that's Roger's terms. However, I disagree with that because at the time that it was consulted on, it was seen as an economic sort of development opportunity for Te Awamutu in response to the Te Awa cycleway benefits that the Cambridge side of the community were going to be receiving. So it has associated economic or business benefits to it because of the national story it tells. Again, the stories cover both the West and the East. You know, it's not focused only on Te Awamutu, but, you know, critically, yeah, it has those, I like you talk about it, you know, an economy that's, you know, declining, you know, so this would still be seen as a favourable project to advance if possible.
Mike?
Yeah, those folks in Cambridge can jump in their cycles and we can bike over to it. But one of the things that is not in here that's been alluded to this morning is around safety and security around the district. And the OPEX and CAPEX came to about $400,000 odd. And that is a benefit of every resident in Waipa. Because I'm figuring, Gary, listening to your sort of rhetoric, is that we really want to try and get to next week and having done the sort of mahi, done the work here. So I just want to throw that in the mix here too, because it's better to do it today in a workshop than actually next week. But, you know, this community is screaming out for initiatives around this, and this is something council can actually lead if this thing even goes ahead at that vote.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. So, I mean, the critical question we first want guidance on is to take the opportunity from tranche one or not. That's question one. Question two is, if we do, then we probably need to go to the next slide. But Papakaya clearly drops out because now that will look to be loan funded. That leaves space, Mike, for better CCTV coverage, if that's the direction you want to signal to start.
Ask about the quantum for the CCTV. We haven't been told about that yet.
So my understanding is, my understanding from Dawn is that the operating costs we've heard about from Datacom exceeded our original estimates, and so there's a shortfall. Dawn's indication was that if we can get through the next 2 years with these increased operating costs, then we've got a fresh LTP to cut the funds for those extra operating costs.
wanting to know how much that might be, that extra operating cost that might be added to this list.
Look, I'll need to clarify that with Dawn and bring it through the paper, but my expectation is it's of a similar quantity to the Papakainga. Yeah. So there's capital, but a lot of data costs. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the figures she gave roughly were 250 capital, around 150 as both maxes of X.
Yeah.
Because she gave.
Yep.
No, it's not a statement. No. I think that's
Yeah, yeah.
Do we put our hands up and say whether we support transport?
Oh yeah, look, I think so, but let's look, can we just get to the, I think there's only one more slide up. Oh yeah, there's one more slide and then the next step. So if we get there, and then Roger, I think we are going to obviously have to give an indication to staff. It's not a vote by any means, but I think around the table we need to say individually how we feel, and that hopefully will end up better than the public feedback that we got, which was just about evenly split. So, Peter, the next slide.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so this is an attempt to have a suggested option for allocating the tranche 1 funding based on all of the feedback and engagement that was undertaken and the nature of the different projects. So number one, Papakainga has been pretty well thrashed out here today, and that's pretty clearly understood, I think, where the council sees that going. Te Arawai, so that, as you also discussed, that $1.7 million doesn't go anywhere near to fully funding a project, but it goes a long way to helping to contribute to the project. And I guess the point that Gary was making, that's a project that's heavily dependent on external fundraising. So it could help from that point of view as well. The Recovery Centre, there has been, as part of the long-term plan, business case work done on that. There is an expectation of using some of the waste levy funds that the council has, and there's significant reserves held in that fund now, I understand. So at least part of the cost is going to need to be covered by council, and that figure of just over $1.2 million is seen as a reasonably substantial contribution towards that project to get it moving ahead. The Lake Naroto heritage restoration work, I think, as I said before, that 360,000 represents the LTP budgets in years 4 to 8 of the LTP. So it basically brings that work, or allows that work to be brought forward and done sooner than otherwise would have been the case. Te Awamutu Naroto Parangia Cycleway, that's a project which in the LTP is shown as fully funded, but the reality is what we're seeing as we work through that, even to deliver section 1 and section 2 of that project, is that there's going to be significant costs that will be well above the estimated budgets. That project is also heavily reliant on external fundraising to the order of 40 to 50% of the total cost of that project. So that is another sum there, that 1.345 million, which is really just, it's a contribution to assist that project in any way possible. Urban Mobility Network Program. So since, I guess, the Better Off funding issue came into the frame, the government's announced and released the Climate Emergency Response Fund. And I understand that that council has made an application to that fund for Urban Mobility Network. So there are other options there. And also, if that's unsuccessful, there is some hope that from year 4 that Waka Kotahi could provide funding through the National Land Transport Fund, the normal roading subsidies that you would see in other areas of your transport program. The next one is the Cambridge Library feasibility study. So that was a project which was talked about in the draft LTP, but it was set to one side because it wasn't seen as being fundable, but it was part of the overall consultation, and it wasn't adopted and included in the LTP, but there was a business case to do the feasibility study. The whole project cost to complete the Cambridge Library replacement, refurbishment, whatever it would be, I think was upwards of $9 or $10 million. So this is just the feasibility study, but that $250,000 is intent is the full cost of that study. And then the urban street lighting improvements, that was an annual LTP project line over the full 10 years. And I guess in allocating money, basically it's exhausted at that stage. And so that program would just progress as shown in the LTP, subject to annual plans from year to year adjusting.
I just see the 1.7 million for Te Aroha. We have the knowledge, of course, that has been leased for a period of time. Is that actually going towards planning, or is there any sort of specific thing that we're doing with this funding that we're progressing, or?
Looks like Sally's coming to the rescue.
Sorry,
maybe
Sally,
just before Sally answers in detail, the overview comment is if the funding was applied for and approved, it would need to be spent before mid-2027. So if the project, okay.
So if I can, so in terms of funding for Te Aroha through the long-term plan, it starts this financial year. This year we are initiating the planning and design work for the new site that we have. So we have funding that started. The differential is that part of the funding to enable the build is external funding requirements for Te Aroha. So from that perspective, the lease that is currently utilising the site is helped to go to the lease costs we have for the site. So funding has already commenced in terms of our long-term plan for the development of Te Aroha.
Liz.
Yeah, I don't really want to say this, but I just want to put my mind at ease following Roger's comments, because we haven't spoken about this, Roger and I. But I'd really like to get some wording or something from our community board representatives from Te Amutu. And obviously we have Lou and Susan here representing them. And it might be that they want to check in with their committee, but let's just make sure we're all on the same page here around Te Aroha. So if you feel really comfortable in saying that the Te Amutu Community Board is in full support of Te Aroha, that's great. But if you need to check back in with that group, then maybe we take this breath and just double check that we're all on the same page. I just don't want a front page story tomorrow saying the community board don't like the idea of it anymore. Is that what I'm hearing? I'm just not too sure.
Yeah, look, yeah, question, Liz. We've got a meeting tonight. Obviously, it's not on the agenda, but I'm sure we can gauge some kind of feedback from them in a formal sense. My understanding is that the Te Amutu Community Board formally supported it wholeheartedly. But if there's been a change of direction since the matter was traversed in our long-term plan, then I guess it would be remiss of us not to gauge that from the community board. But certainly the LTP exercise showed support across the district for it. Yeah, I accept that. I accept that.
Well, but hang on a minute. We've got a long-term plan that we're all working to that has been accepted by the community, and obviously over a 10-year period there's going to be some changes of minds and changes of personnel and all the rest of it, but we can't just change the LTP on the basis of somebody just had a change of mind. It needs to go back out to the community if there's going to be a change. That I would suggest to the overall direction of that LTP.
So critically, a big component of this project is reliant on external fundraising. And the council either needs to be absolutely committed or not in order for that fundraising to be successful. Gary, you advise us that Trust Waikato have allocated $1 million.
Yep. So that was, they allocated that a couple of years ago now. We've extended it a couple of times. I've extended it through to September next year, but it seems unlikely they'll extend it further than that. Yeah. So that's $1 million.
So right now we're geared to deliver this project, but we'll need to know pretty quickly if there is a change in direction signaled by the council, and we'll need to explain that to the community.
I'd just like to say that it's great to gauge the community board's sentiments towards the project, but it is a district-wide project, and I know there's a lot of people in Pirongia ward who really support it because, you know, the locations around Pirongia are a key part of it, and so if you're taking, you know, a pulse of the community, it needs to be more than just the Tuamutu Community Board.
Thanks, Claire. Bill.
Yeah, can I also just point out that at a national level, Ngāti Apakura have had discussions with Culture and Heritage about this matter, and Shane came and did a presentation to Culture and Heritage, or came on our backs in terms of a presentation to Culture and Heritage. And we haven't requested funding in terms of this project at all, but they weren't, they weren't opposed to coming up and looking at it in any way, shape or form. So it's possible that there's some more there, but I just wanted to say that Shane had come because we'd, in our reconciliation with Te Ara Whiti, we'd asked for a meeting with Culture and Heritage, and Shane did come up and talk about the project, and they were supportive of it, and even to the point that, you know, they were saying that they were happy for the minister to click in with us at some point in time. So I'd like to think that we could go ahead with it.
So just a question that I've got in terms of the suggested funding options, and I'm, I suppose, concerned or interested in the fact. So if we take the Resource Recovery Centre, which I think, you know, from a community and a national perspective is really important. We've got 1.2 in suggested, but the figure is 1.8 in terms of the 10-year plan. I really think, well, the question is, if we approve, say, 1.2, where's the other 600 coming from? Because if it's not in the 10-year plan at the moment, there's going to be an implication to that. And secondly, following on from that, if it's not available, why aren't we looking to doing, I was going to say one job, but a number of these jobs properly and make sure that we can actually finish it, because the recovery centre is critical for the whole district, and it needs to be looked at in that light. So I'd rather do the jobs properly that we fund than try and do a pick and mix over the whole lot and end up either not doing them properly or ending up needing extra money to come from somewhere else. Gary.
So my understanding is, together with the waste levy, that would be sufficient to get the $1.8 million project across the line.
Okay. Well, that answers that one. Was there any other?
Just through your worship, just quietly. I just wanted, we heard from Gary the figure that Trust Waikato had advanced 1 million. The ability of having that rolled over again is, you've done it twice, if I understood. So if we can't roll that over, could we utilise that in this current infrastructure if we actually voted for going ahead with the TRY?
Yeah, I'll have to have a few more conversations just about how comfortable they would be in terms of utilising it for more planning sort of processes, but they'd probably want some certainty that this was going to proceed. I think that's
my experience with fundraising, Lou, would be that before they'd release the fund, they would want to know that it was going to get finished. and not just started and lose that money. So that would be part of the total funding package rather than just, here's another $1 million to put into the fund and hopefully the rest will follow. I think they would want to see some real positive decision that it was going to happen. Yeah.
Whether that fundraising would be confirmed, the external fundraising would be confirmed before it got green light. And if that fundraising is not confirmed, then or is it going to be back on first to finish the project?
Well, that's a decision that the council is going to have to make. The fundraising, again, personal experience, the fundraising commitment is always a bit of a wet finger in the wind. And if you take the Cambridge pool as the last example, we had an objective to, or a target to raise a certain level. We didn't get there, so we ended up with alternative funding options. So it's a case of putting our best foot forward in terms of trying to get that external fundraising, then looking at the position, and it's either a possible loan extension or more asset sales or whatever the council decides to do at the time to get it over the line, or else to say this project's not going ahead.
So the next question that comes to my mind is, can I ask Gary, apart from the $1 million that you've talked about, what efforts have been made to get additional external funding?
So at this stage, we're just resetting the project because we've obviously shifted the whole thing to Bunnings. So once we, I guess, get more certainty around design and costs, then we'll start pushing through. So there are some other funding.
So the answer is nothing.
Well, we can't until we have some more certainty around what it's going to look like at the new site.
And so if I can just comment on that, so I just need to recognise that the funding in the LTPs only started this financial year for the project. So that resetting is happening now as we talk. You've already had conversations today around what's happened financially in terms of where we're sitting now. The criticality is that we're still continuing conversations in the background for support of Te Arawai. It very much links with the Journeys project, which we already have out there. We already have people participating in across the district as well. So this isn't a new conversation, but very much that we just need to remember that the project restarted this financial year and we're only a couple of months into that.
Mike.
It's probably a question for Gary, maybe Sally actually. It's around number 7, the library feasibility study over in Cambridge. Is it going to look at alternate options? I'm just thinking of the local government reform. I'm thinking of all these shifts that are coming in, and council could be potentially significantly reduced, in which case the existing building could be absolutely fine. But I guess what my question is the feasibility study, is it going to consider alternate options? Because it's really, to me, is the library is sort of linked in with a bit of a wet finger in the wind of what council, in terms of staffing capacity, is going to look like in the future. Because there's obviously buildings we used to be in across the road and that sort of thing. And, you know, I guess, are we going to look at options of actually buying this to alleviate that so we can extend our library within that? Is that going to be part of it or not? Or is it more just the building?
And another thing that impacts on that, Mike, is the new flexible work arrangements and just how much office space we need. So right now, Chris Ryan is leading a piece of work to look at all of that stuff so that we've got a very clear picture leading into the next LTP about what office requirements we'll need. That's one issue. The other issue, of course, is the Cambridge Library and what form that will take. Depending on what the future of local comes out of the future of local government, the role of libraries could be quite different. So that certainly needs to be factored into this discussion. social spaces, gathering spaces, those sorts of things.
Yeah, so that's in terms of what we did include for that feasibility study, was to look at all of those options, as well as whether or not there's partners within the community that also want to join that space as well. So there has been previous conversations with the Cambridge Museum around that.
Yep. Okay. Peter, the next steps.
Yes, so next step, so in a week's time, you'll be back having the debate, I guess, but tranche one. And if you do make a decision to apply for tranche one, then there's a deadline to get the funding proposal together and submitted through the DIA portal by Friday, the 30th of September. I would just note here that the idea of waivers has been, well, it was first raised by DIA, and waiver by way of an extension to that 30th September date. It was made very clear that that's entirely at the DIA's discretion if council was to apply for a waiver. However, there has been some further suggestion from DIA that if there needs to be a short-term extension to allow time to just complete your funding proposal documentation, they would look a lot more favorably on that. So I'm not suggesting that the council would need to do that. And certainly it's not a suggestion to take more time to do further work in terms of engagement with the community or any other body, but it does mean that we perhaps do have a little bit of a relief valve in terms of just putting together a substantial funding proposal that's well documented.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, so
just
Susan.
Quick question. If we were to secure a waiver, would there be any, have we been given any indication of what that extension time could look like?
Short term.
No, so no real, no clarity beyond short term.
So look,
interesting.
Just in terms of how we handle the rest of the meeting, Gary, my thought were, while we were discussing this, first discussion needs to be whether we're going to accept it or not. Otherwise, we're going to be doing a lot of talking about nothing. So we need to make that indication, not a decision, but it's an indication of where we're sitting. Then we need just to confirm which of those projects we're favouring at the moment to enable staff to come back with a report to the meeting on the, what was it, on the 20th. So do it that way round, and I'm just looking at the times, 12:30 now, in terms of staffing, Gary, and if we could deal with whether we're going to accept the funding before lunch, take a short break for lunch, come back and then finish off the discussion around the projects, and then we've still got 2 items to carry off after lunch. Is that going to be achievable? But I'm looking at the councillors as well, knowing that you might, is anyone having to rush off, or we're okay for that sort of a program? Gary?
Can I just check? Can I just check, Marie, your availability? Okay, thank you.
All right. So, Bill.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to check, my position in regards to the vote, your show of hands that you're looking to take before you do it, when before I perhaps leave my hand down or put my hand up. I know that I got an invite to be at this workshop because it goes to the service delivery on the 20th. But in terms of this decision making right here and right now, should I leave? Should I stay? Should I put my hands under the desk and not take them up? I'm sorry, Jim. I just wanted to check that. I didn't want to get the voting wrong because I happened to raise my hand like an auction at the wrong time.
First off, there's no voting today in terms of making a firm commitment because it's a committee and we can't. It's a workshop, I should say, rather than a committee meeting. you're at the committee meeting next week. It's service delivery. So look, your input's valued around the table as to guide all of us around the table. So I'm quite happy to, I suppose the decision, are we going to accept tranche 1 funding or not? And look, I really feel, I'll start it off, I really feel conflicted over this issue. I totally am opposed to the Three Waters reforms. But when you look at the practicalities of it and the impact it's going to have on our community if we don't accept it, because one way or another, that the tranche 1 is, as I understand it, if you like, tax funded, central government funded. Tranche 2 is a charge, largely a charge that's going to go onto our water bills. And again, if we don't accept it and other councils around the country do, we're just going to be cross-subsidising other areas. And I think the same with this first funding. And as long as our hands are not tied in terms of being able to criticise and continue to criticise the Three Waters reforms, I think personally, we're doing our community a disservice by not accepting it, as much as that galls me. But that's my position. So I think if we go around the table, everyone can make their say, and we can have a bit of a show of hands if it looks like it's a close decision. Phil,
just quickly with that question to the community, there was 3 options: stalling it to 2024. Is it just 1 and 2, or is there 3?
Okay, so I think you always got to have in the back of your mind, if you roll it over until 2024, when the second tranche comes available,
right?
There is no guarantee that tranche 2 will be there. At the moment, central government has said the new entities are going to have to fund that. There's an election for central government before then. So if you roll it over, just be aware that there's a potential, and National have already said that they were going to reverse the decisions on the Three Waters. So you may lose it if it's rolled over. But everyone's going to have to predict how the cards are going to fall 18 months out or 12 months out, just about. Okay. Well, it's not it's an indication how you're fitting. Do we accept it or not? No, tranche 1. You're saying no. Would you?
Yeah, not a tranche 1.
I'm for it, and I agree with lots of projects on there.
I support what you've said, Jim. Yeah. Yes.
Mike?
Same. Yeah, I support it.
Yeah, like we're kind of painted into a corner, aren't we? Which every ounce of my being feels really quite frustrated about. But I think we would be foolish to not take the money offered in tranche 1, especially if you go through the sort of risk analysis around potential changes of government or not changes of governments. And we won't be thanked by our communities if we, on principle, much as it irks me, refuse the money and then there's no money on offer. So it sticks in my throat, but yes.
Join the club.
I'm just, I absolutely concur with what you said, Your Worship. Absolutely 100%, and reluctantly, yes, reluctantly.
Reluctantly, yes, and I agree with the list of projects that are up there, including Te Arawai.
Yeah, pretty seriously conflicted, but I do support it. Yeah, and I agree with the projects, especially Te Arawai.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Right. So we've got the majority around the table. I know there's a few absenteeisms today, but Yeah, so we're just working out, or I think Gary's working out, if all three voted against it, where we would be sitting, the three absences.
We'd be sitting on 6, 7.
Oh.
7, 4.
Yeah. Okay, but that's assuming that the three vote in favour of not taking the money. We've got Andrew, Bruce and Hazel.
So your worship, this is just a direction. We'll bring you the paper along those lines. You can debate it at Graham's committee, and this,
go out with a bang, Graham. Okay.
So a direction is.
Hang on.
A direction is all we've required today, and this isn't cast in stone. You're welcome to debate it fully and change the direction at that meeting.
So there was some comments around the table, so we can tidy up this item completely. That with the Papakainga noting that it's going to be funded from elsewhere, but working into this list of funding options is the security cameras, as, if you like, the replacement issue that we've got there. Is everyone comfortable with that, and leave it to staff? Have you got enough to go on there, guys? Okay, all right. So we've got a fair indication of what the paper will look like next week. No, we still got 2 items on the agenda for this. No, as long as everyone's comfortable, I just thought if we can tidy this one up as quickly as we have,